Good morning. This part is called Meaning, Purpose, and Sacred Living. The first question is, what is the role of meaning in a world that treats meaning as optional, secondary, or subjective? What is the role of meaning? Meaning, in other words, I would say it's the same thing as feeling, right? Because we could go on doing a lot of things that are really hurtful to our bodies without noticing them at all until it becomes really grave to the point where it actually hurts or it stops us from functioning, the body functioning properly, just because we didn't feel. And the simplest example of this is, for example, having a blister in our foot, right? Because a blister, when it comes to a point where it actually becomes a wound, it has to go through a lot of time of discomfort, a lot of discomfort. But then we push through the discomfort for a lot of reasons, maybe because it's inconvenient, maybe because for a lot of reasons, to the point where it becomes a wound. And then when it becomes a wound, we can no longer wear the shoes or we can no longer continue, right? And so our disconnection from our capacity to feel into things and to feel when things are becoming really uncomfortable repeatedly, and we still carry on with the actions, is exactly the same thing as the question of meaning. When we are able to do a lot of things in life without absolutely no meaning at all, just because of theoretical reasons, right? Again, it's the same thing. Just because it's convenient or inconvenient, or we want the money, or we think we want the ambition, or we want whatever it is that we convinced ourselves that we want to be doing this action for, but we don't feel into the action. The action is not that fulfilling. The action is not that satisfying. The action feels uncomfortable, right? And a long time of doing things that are not that are really uncomfortable, that are not very comfortable, in the same way that it lends to a wound, it leads to a wound in our physical bodies. They also lead to wounds in our lives, right? So it's just a question of time before eventually doing a lot repeatedly things without meaning end up into a crisis of meaning, right? Like, why are we doing those things? Why are we doing those things? Is it just to get money? Is it just to sell more products? What for? What for? So, what is the role of meaning? The role of meaning is really connecting us to why we do the things we're doing, to make us create things more out of a place of reason. Why are we doing the things we're doing? If I have the choice to be doing anything I want to be doing on earth, given, let's just entertain this as an option, why would I ever choose to be doing what I'm doing now? Right? And as long as we don't ask ourselves those questions, we have no meaning in what we're doing, and then just our work becomes lifeless. Anyone else in the world could be doing it, right? In a lot of work, you could just replace the person doing one thing by another person, and no one would notice the difference. But what is it that you can do in life that if anyone else but you does it, the whole world would notice, right? That's the question of meaning, I would say. Meaning just gives our lives a flavor of delight, of magic, and not only our lives, also the lives of people around us, the lives of people using our products, using our services, using our whatever it is that we're offering. The following question is, can a life of beauty, harmony, and presence be a real path, not a luxury, but a necessity for humanity's future? Can a life of beauty, harmony, and presence be a real path, not a luxury, but a necessity for humanity's future? Well, the beautiful thing about life is that what was once a luxury becomes almost a necessity through time, right? Maybe electricity at some moment was considered a luxury. Now it's a necessity. Maybe internet at some moment was considered a luxury. Now everyone needs it for their work, for whatever it is. We need internet today to function, right? So what was once a luxury is now a necessity. And of course, it so happens that it spreads through some people in the beginning, but then eventually everyone has to have access to it. It just becomes a basic need. So, of course, a life of beauty, harmony, and presence is a real path. And of course, it's necessary, right? But in order for us to get to where we are today, which is a beautiful place, we needed to go through all of those things and all of those understandings, right? When we start learning to ride a bicycle, for example, we have to go through a lot of periods of not knowing how to do it. And then eventually, when we are able to solve the situations we're facing that make us fall, eventually we learn how to ride a bicycle and we become good just because of the periods where we didn't know how to do it. And we actually, even if those periods don't directly serve us, at least they make us better teachers, because then we can, to the same extent to which we struggled in a certain part of the experience, to the same extent we can convey the lessons and the things we got out of those experiences to other people. If just everything came easily, we would never be able to relate to any kind of other experience or become good teachers. So I would say that in the same way, of course, we needed all of those experiences that we had. But now, of course, the following path is for a lot of people would be to live a life of beauty and harmony and presence and do things because I want to do those things and choose out of conscious choice, out of deliberate choosing, the things I would like to be doing. How would I like to spend my time? What would I like to work on? What would I like to learn? What career? What would I like to offer the world? And once we give ourselves the luxury to contemplate all of those questions and eventually pursue them, of course, it's going to be a very beautiful transformation for the world. The next question is, how do we rediscover wonder, reverence, and sacredness without rejecting the scientific, technological world we have built? The thing is with those questions is that it doesn't necessarily have to be either or, right? For example, we don't have to choose between being a kid and then being a teenager and then being an adult. We have to go through all of those phases. And it's the same thing in life. We don't have to reject anything that we were in order to become something different. In the same way, for example, that when we move from being a teenager to being an adult, we keep on all of the lessons, but we become something different. We grow to a different stage in our lives, and all of the things we learned during our teenage years, for example, whether that was skills or learning an instrument or whatever, we still get to keep all of those things, right? But now we become more whole as adults. So it's the same thing, I would say, more or less with those phases in our lives. We have to go through them, but once we grow out of them, we don't have to actually leave anything behind. All of the skills we've learned, everything we've learned, we will still keep. But now we get to use them more wisely. We get to become different people, but we still get to keep the same learnings we got from those experiences. So how do we rediscover wonder, reverence, and sacredness without rejecting the scientific? Well, I would say that to a big extent, the scientific now has become more or less ingrained in us, right? Like, for example, at some moment, we needed to put a lot of effort into building all of our technological infrastructure and internet and the apps and all of those things. Today, even with AI and a lot of this, we don't need to put in the same effort. Now we can focus on other things, right? Now, for example, if it took a team of 100 people to build an app, now maybe it would take a team of 5, 10 people, right? And the things that those 100 people were doing are to a big extent now completely different to the things that the 5 people would be doing, right? So once we get to this phase where all of the things we were doing and we needed to put a lot of effort into it because it was new, now become embodied in us, become ingrained in our society, we don't need to put in the same effort anymore in order to maintain those things. So luckily now, let's say on the technological side, at least not the scientific side, but at least the technological side, it doesn't need the same effort, it doesn't need the same investment all of the humans were putting into it as 1 year, 2 years, 3 years ago, right? So now we can use all of this effort and do something different, right? Now, instead of focusing on the mundane details of building an app, now maybe you can spend more time focusing on the user and the experience and the design and all of those things. So I would say it's just understanding that every phase we go through, it teaches us something. And once we grow out of this phase, we still get to keep the skills and the learnings, everything we got from the previous stage, but now we become able to utilize them even in a better way. And we are able to have all of the effort we were putting and all of the effort we were doing, we have to spend into a new thing. Now we have it available to us to concentrate into another area of improvement. The next question is, what does it mean to live in a way where every act, word, and creation is an offering, not a transaction? I would say that it would mean to actually finally start living, because when every act, word, creation is a transaction and not an offering, we just live in a very dead world, right? We live in a world where, for example, given the same product for the same price, it doesn't matter where you buy it from, right? But nothing in life is like this. It's like saying I will have the same conversation with 2 people and expecting it to go exactly the same. Nothing in life, nothing that is alive, actually is the same if you repeat it with different people, because everyone has a different, unique essence, and whether that person is available, is there or not, the whole experience will be different. So we have to start looking into the nature of things. We have to start looking, for example, into why would I buy a certain product and not another one? Why would I buy a certain product from this place and not from another place, right? And now we start understanding that interactions are not transactions. They're really exchanges of a lot of human values. And we get to see our act of power, it's called, as a power of purchase power. It's called purchase power for a reason, because it is really a purchase power. Where do I buy my things from? What do I buy? How do I choose to invest my money? In what qualities do I choose to invest my money? In what qualities am I looking for in the products I'm buying? And now we got to a place where actually we're no longer just seeking products for the sake of product. We're seeking to have experiences, interactions with people who have put their heart and soul into the things they're doing. And that's a completely different perspective. I don't just want to eat. I really want to eat food made by someone who had absolutely poured their whole being into what they're doing. They love absolutely what they're doing, and they wanted to cook for me. Not just because they have to cook, not just because they want to get a salary. And that's a whole other story. That's a whole other world. That's a world filled with a lot of acts of, you get touched every single interaction, right? So it would mean to start actually living for the first time, because everything else is not living. Everything else is just, it's just lifeless interactions, lifeless transactions. The next question is, how do we remember that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived through love and awareness? A mystery to be solved implies a lot of thinking, and we can think our ways through things. But in a lot of ways, the mind has a very limited perspective of the world. The mind, at best, can have a few resolutions lower than reality. If I give an example of this, imagine you go to a movie. Already the movie is a resolution lower than reality, right? Because, for example, if I'm sitting in this room, as soon as you put a camera, the camera has to hold a certain perspective. So you get the perspective from the director. And of course, they could be very beautiful perspectives, but we have to remember that it's only a perspective. We lose a lot of details. For example, given that I put this camera here, you lose a lot of details. You lose, for example, the temperature. You lose the real noise that I'm surrounded with, because I'm going to edit the noise out. You lose the temperature. You lose a lot of things that are available here, but that won't be captured on the camera. And again, imagine now you go to watch this video or this movie, and then you go and you try to tell it to someone. Well, again, you're going to lose another dimension in the act of telling the story to someone else. And so we have to remember that thinking is never actually able to reproduce reality. Thinking is just one perspective, the same way a camera is a perspective of a bigger scene, right? So as long as we only look at life through videos, we'll never actually be able, or through thinking, we'll never actually be able to capture the whole essence of what's happening. So to go back to the question, which says, how do we remember that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived through love and awareness? Well, I can tell you all you want, all I want about, for example, my surfing experience, but you'll only know some details about it. But as long as you, for yourself, go and surf, you'll never get the sheer pleasure of actually being on a wave and surfing, right? And so we have to understand that while mysteries that can be solved have a lot of conceptual, and maybe could have a lot of conceptual, nice fulfillment, they never give us the meaning or the feeling behind an experience, right? And it would not be conceivable for anyone, for example, to for them to be told that, oh, don't go surfing, let me tell you about it, right? Because there's a huge difference between going surfing and being told about surfing, right? Which is the feeling element, which is experiencing element, right? So a mystery to be solved is just telling stories, it's just thinking about life. But we have to remember that things have to be experienced. And there's a huge difference between everything I can tell you about the surfing experience and what you'll actually experience in surfing itself. So I would say for me, that's the best way I can answer this question. And yeah, the more we live things, and of course, the more we live things with attention, with presence, which can also be called love and awareness. Awareness is key, of course, because if we're experiencing something and we're thinking of something else, we're not really experiencing actually the thing at hand. We're only thinking of something else. So we're experiencing the fact of being disconnected from what we're doing and thinking of something else. This is the experience. But how would it feel like to experience truly something? And if I gave the example of surfing, is because, for example, when you're surfing, you cannot get yourself to think of anything else. You have to be so focused on it that actually you learn to appreciate what it means like to be aware in something, right? And so yeah, love and awareness is key to experience, to feeling. And of course, love makes it even better because now everything you're feeling is just magnified and ecstatic. This is the end of the section, meaning, purpose, and sacred living.